direct respond to that. And then the legislative priorities of the Earned Income Tax Credit, Voting Language Access Act, anything, I mean, anything you want to talk about. These are just things that I think you guys sent over. So.
Okay, I think I want to talk about 82nd Avenue then. As well.
Great. Okay.
Okay. I'm gonna start admitting people and then we will go live in just a second.
Okay. Good morning.
Morning.
Great. We are on Facebook. We have people in the room.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi, Kathy. Nice to see you. Thanks for being here again.
Wouldn't miss it.
Thank you.
I'm excited to meet Khanh Pham.
Yeah.
I've been during the House Energy and Environment Committee. I think she saw me testify on the black carbon and then used the information in testimony on a different bill. So I really
That's great. I love that.
I'm really pleased with that because it shows that our testimony is actually may actually be doing some good.
Great. Great. Well, I think we'll go ahead and get started, right, Joe? So we're on live on Facebook, and we have the mute unmute kind of figured out.
Yes. So I am just going to go ahead and put everyone on mute right now. And then just a few things before we get started. First, just want to thank everybody for joining us this morning. Spending your morning with Rep Reynolds and Rep Pham means a lot to all of us. Before we begin, I just want to do a little bit of a land acknowledgement and just say that right now we are seated, or in House District 36, Rep Reynolds District is seated on the traditional land of the Yali Tualatin, the Wasco Cowlitz, Clackamas, and Kalapuya. Indigenous people have played a large role in shaping the world we live in today, so we just want to acknowledge them before we get started. And then furthermore, just a little note about conduct. We obviously really value this time to speak with constituents, especially since we're not able to meet all of you in person. But we just ask that this town hall remain a space of just active policy discussions, even impassioned critique. But we just ask that everyone remain respectful to each other and the representatives. And if someone's behavior kind of crosses the line from frustrated to disrespectful, we may ask that individual to leave the call. But with that, I would just love to hand it off to Rep Reynolds to do some introductions. And then the only notes I will make about how we'll do question and answers is just if you have a question and your face cam is off, just if we would just ask you to please put that in the chat. And then if you have a question that you would like to ask in person to the representatives, just ask to unmute and go camera off, and then we will unmute you and we can answer that question. But with that, I think we've covered everything. So I'm going to hand it off to Rep Reynolds.
Great. Good morning, everyone. So great to see so many familiar faces. I see Judy there has her Washington, D.C. for statehood poster there in the background. That's great. Really grateful, as always, that you are choosing to spend your time with us this morning. I'm Lisa Reynolds, State Representative for Oregon House District 36, which covers Portland's West Side. And I'd like to introduce my friend and first year colleague, whatever we call ourselves, Khanh Pham, who on my screen is over here, Representative Khanh Pham from House District 46. I'm going to turn it over to her, but I just want to share that I met Khanh. It was probably a little over, I feel like it was pre-COVID. I think it was February of 2020 when we were both being interviewed by WinPAC, which is a women's investment network group that kind of interviews and then endorses women who are running for office. And I just, it was just one of those things, like the minute I met her, I'm like, oh, she's the real deal. And it's very important she wins her race, and we really need her leadership at the state level. She certainly has shown incredible leadership in her community. So without further ado, Representative Pham, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about yourself and your district, the special challenges your district is facing during this time, and your legislative priorities, and really the floor is yours. So we're really thrilled to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rep. Reynolds. I'm so happy to be here with all of you, and I similarly feel just honored to serve with you in this really just feels like a very historic time, and just really grateful for your leadership too. So a little bit about myself. I actually never imagined that I would be taking office. I've been a longtime community organizer, and was really, thought that's my identity. And I have been organizing in the Jade District, which is the heart of House District 46, for many years, with different groups, but mostly with the Asian Pacific American Network of Oregon. Where I served, I had so many different titles, from manager of immigrant organizing to environmental justice manager. With a small nonprofit, you kind of do a lot of different things, but that experience, door knocking and talking to community about their issues, really shaped and drove me to eventually run for office. People kept raising the same issues around the unsafe streets and the rising housing costs and the lack of good paying jobs, and we didn't always see a lot of action on it, right? And it felt like our communities weren't being heard. And so when I got involved with the Portland Clean Energy Fund initiative, when it was just a concept, and I helped to build the coalition to pass but later now is policy, and is actually raising $30 to $50 million a year, maybe 60. The range is varying, but that to really invest in renewable energy projects and energy efficiency projects and jobs and investments, and prioritizing communities of color and low-income communities that have been left out of this kind of shift to sustainability and green energy. So that kind of experience of building that coalition and knocking on doors, getting signatures and petitions, and eventually driving the vote to pass it, gave me my first taste of electoral campaigning, and gave our coalition a sense that that we were building political power in this city, and that we could actually go to the state level to keep our movement going, because we know that one city isn't going to pass it. We need to pass transformative change at the state level through what we call a Green New Deal, but whatever you call it, it's really about transforming our agriculture, our housing, our transportation. Every part of our economy and our lives needs to change if we want to address one of the biggest crises of our times. So anyways, that's why I'm here. I'm really excited to be here with all of you, and then and to be serving with Lisa during this really pivotal moment.
Great. And, I think we're all aware of we know there was always racism against Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders. But obviously it has come to a bit of a head under our previous president and his horrific labeling of COVID and the causes of COVID. And I know your district has been hit hard. A lot of Asian American owned businesses have been vandalized. How are you seeing you or us or city or state, city or county responding to that in a way that feels meaningful, or even grassroots? How are you feeling about things in that realm?
I appreciate that there is rising awareness around anti-Asian hate. I don't think people took it seriously the previous year. It took the events in Georgia to really lift it up. But frankly, our community has been experiencing it for over a year now, since COVID and Trump and all this rhetoric around anti-Chinese rhetoric, which is always, to be clear, has always been part of U.S. history, from the Chinese Exclusion Act to there's actually been a lot of hate crimes that have gone from the 1980s Sacramento shootings of children in Sacramento that were targeting Southeast Asian, schoolyard of Southeast Asian children, to Vincent Chin. I mean, there is a long history of othering Asians, and seeing, no matter how many generations you are in the United States, or even if you're just here recently, but just seeing you as other and not truly American. And that kind of rhetoric and hate has really fueled this violence. And I think I'm calling for investments right now in a hate crimes package, because we recognize it's not even just Asians, it's also anti-Muslim. So many different communities are being targeted right now, and we need to do better tracking. We need to do better promotion of what do people do. A lot of people don't know that the DOJ has a hate crimes hotline, and a lot of communities frankly don't want to take aren't ready to jump straight to a criminal investigation of what happens to them. We need a lot of different options for people that are really rooted in community-based organizations that people trust. Right now, the DOJ, if there's something that's not quite a crime, but it's still really awful and frightening, the DOJ can't, these lawyers, they don't know what to do with it within our current system. And so we really need a hotline system that's really giving support to these community-based organizations. Right now, I know Apano is dealing with a lot of incidents that don't rise yet to the persecution. It's not going to be prosecuted, but victims need, their walls are being trashed, their yard, their fences being taken down, or whatever, things are happening, and they don't get a lot of support. And so we need some victim support funding as well. So I'm hoping that the state will actually fund this package of hate crimes response, and also fund the DOJ to actually analyze and evaluate, to do some, just so we can do some better analysis about what's working, what we need to strengthen. Yeah. And I also want to lift up that API communities are talking about all the things that make communities feel safe, right? Whether it's making sure that they can stay in their communities and they're not being displaced by the astronomically rising housing prices, to also, our community is mourning the second death on 82nd Avenue in 2 weeks, 2 separate deaths on the same intersection, both pedestrian fatalities, because that's also a public health crisis. If people, this is a street that kids cross to go to school every day, and it's just been neglected for decades, and we need to invest in safety in a very real way as well. So I'm hopeful that the new awareness will actually result in action as well. And I'm going to keep pushing for it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm there with you. And I would say, I think your point is really well taken, that, sometimes folks in your community who are victims aren't necessarily comfortable calling on law enforcement, which is a whole other topic, which we probably won't get into today, except to maybe acknowledge on Monday, that a package of 9 bills on police accountability was passed, which is a step forward. We still have a long way to go. I just did want to acknowledge today's May 1st, which begins the month that's called the Asian American Pacific Islander Month. And, is this a Hallmark thing, or is this something that's meaningful in the community, or is this like I said, a Hallmark holiday?
I would say it's something that I think it's important for the broader community. It's like a time to actually, it's when teachers will often lift up curriculum and I didn't have this growing up, so I appreciate it. And I think it's important that we do learn about API history, the way in which Asian Americans have contributed to the fabric of this country from its inception, right? From the railroads that we drive, that we go on, or, just there's so much history, and that I wasn't taught, and that would have made a big difference when I was young, if I could have learned about prominent Asian Americans who made a difference in their communities and had a lasting impact. So I think it's important. I personally look at it as, even as an adult now, that I feel like it became more popular only in the last decade, maybe at most, as a way for me to learn and lift up Asian Americans and learn more about their analysis, some of their ideas and the contributions they made. So I'm looking forward to actually spending the month of May lifting that up. And I want to say it's also International Workers' Day, May Day, and also an important day to lift up the contribution that workers make as a foundation of our society, especially now in the midst of COVID, where we've seen our essential workers give up, put their bodies on the line so that we can still keep getting our food and still keep just basic society, basic functions of society going. So I'm proud to share both days with May Day and APA Heritage Month.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for that shout out, for sure. I wanted to ask a little bit about, I know a lot of legislative priorities, but I'm wondering if you could share a few that are particularly important to you these days, and where we are in session and everything.
Sure. Well, I definitely, of course, have my Oregon Clean Energy Opportunity priorities, which are going really well, advancing out of, energy affordability events out of the House, and Healthy Homes is going well, which advances home weatherization and energy efficiency programs, particularly for low-income households that may not have as full access. And then what 100% Clean, which is HB 2021, is also in House Revenue right now. It was passed out. Yeah, so we're moving it forward. I'm hopeful about that. And then I sit on the House Revenue Committee, and I'm really committed to making sure that we have a more equitable tax system, and including for our most low income Oregonians. So I'm chief sponsoring House Bill 2819, like don't forgetting the number, but it's Leave No Worker Behind, and it's basically expanding the earned income tax credit for ITIN filers who pay taxes but don't currently get the benefits of our earned income tax credit because they don't have a social security number. And it also impacts mixed status households. So if you have even just one person who doesn't have a social security number, but you have a social security number, and often this impacts households with children. They don't have access to this earned income tax credit, which we know is a really critical anti-poverty tool. Children who grow up in families that have the earned income tax credit get better grades in school, they have better health outcomes. So this is so key to helping Oregon's children, just expanding this earned income tax credit. So Lisa, I know you've done a little work too, so I welcome your thoughts about it.
Yeah, no, we're definitely looking at this. There's a program based out of Boston, just overall actually filing to get the earned income tax credit, which can be, between $2,500 and $3,000 per family per year. There's a lot of people who kind of leave that money on the table. They don't file for income taxes because they don't owe, and so they don't feel they need to file, but they're leaving this money on the table. There's the pediatrician in Boston who embedded tax filers in her pediatric clinic. And given, I'll keep saying it, the pediatric clinic is a trusted place for a lot of people. That's why we want to give vaccines, OHA. They were able to encourage and help families file their tax returns. I think they've returned $2 or $3 million to families in the Boston area. So we're looking at similar programs here in Oregon through kind of that medical home model. Great. And then I know you also had something about voter access around the voter pamphlets, which are such a great resource in Oregon. Not every state has those voter pamphlets. I was surprised to learn that.
Yeah, I love our mail-in ballots, our mail-in voting system. And we also want to make sure that everyone has access to understand what they're voting on, and at least statewide. So this is a ballot measure initiative 3020, HB 3021, which would require the Secretary of State to take the top 5 languages spoken in each county and make sure that they translate at least the state level candidates and the state level ballot measures into the top 5 languages spoken in Oregon and in the counties, to make sure that I know as a community organizer at Apana, one of my most satisfying experiences was doing ballot parties where we would help people understand what they were voting for. For many people, they've never really engaged in voting because it's intimidating and it can be misleading. We know that the statements on ballot, on the voter pamphlet statements, can be confusing. Like, both sides sound really great, and I get all this mail and I don't know who to believe. And so if it's translated also into your own language, though, it's a chance for you to really engage in the process of democracy, which I find, I'm so proud of Oregon's system, but I want to make sure that it's accessible to everyone. So this is a bill that asserts that, we have a right to understand, everyone has a right to understand and be understood on what they're voting for.
That's awesome. That's great. I want to talk about a few things in my wheelhouse right now, and then we will open it up to questions. I also, actually, before I do that though, I do want to mention, I love a lot of things about Rep. Pham's district. For some reason, we did a lot of Moms Demand Action work at the Montavilla Farmers Market, which is a great farmers market with an incredible hardware store across the street. I can't remember what it's called. It's called like the Plywood or something, right? Do you know the name of that?
I know they have a great sign. I drive by it all the time, but it's like,
yes, yeah. But in any case, so that's awesome. But one of the community organizations that I have been most impressed with is Rahab Sisters, which is centered in your district as well. And for those who For my Moms Demand Action friends, I got to know Rahab Sisters through Annalise Davis, who's a former executive director there. I've done some volunteering there. I'm a monthly donor there. It's something that I just think is an amazing organization. And we have Sarah Fisher here and Connor McGee to just talk about that just for a few minutes, just to highlight a really special organization in Rep FAM's district.
Thank you so much. I'm Sarah Fisher. I have the privilege of being the acting executive director of Rahab Sisters. I've been involved in Rahab Sisters on and off since its founding in 2003. And a handful of us wanted to create a space on 82nd Avenue that would offer a break and some rest and an experience of community and a hot meal to women who were on the street. And Connor, maybe you can put the link in the chat and the full name while I'm talking, and anything else that I forget to say. And we began with a mission primarily to sex workers, and then quickly expanded our mission to anyone who was female or female identified who was marginalized by the sex industry, drug addiction, houselessness, loneliness. And the organization grew and grew. It started as a ministry of the church. In 2010, we became a separate 501c3. And in 2017, we hired our first paid staff member, who was Annalisa Davis, who was remarkable, a uniquely skilled person. And Rahab Sisters grew exponentially from then until now. And with the pandemic, we continued to grow and significantly expanded our services to fill what we learned about as many, many needs on the part of our guests and their friends. And Rahab Sisters has always been driven by the needs that we hear about from the women who come to be with us on the street. When the pandemic started, we started serving men for the first time. We served them in the parking lot. We served the women on our big lawn. We're at St. Peter and Paul Episcopal Church, which is on 82nd between Burnside and Ash. And my background is the outside of the church. And we also started doing a camp outreach early in 2020, and we have caravans that drive around individuals in their cars, and we bring a meal and supplies, and mostly it's kind of hospitality going on the road. And so right now we're really poised for significant further expansion in our search for a new executive director. We've applied for a couple of grants to also hire a programs director to build our capacity to significantly expand our volunteer corps and our ability to do kind of citywide advocacy for the things that we're involved with: houselessness, mental health, healthcare for women. We also have big dreams for 2021, which is to begin entering into a formal partnership with our host church to redevelop the church property for deeply affordable housing, affordable retail, women-facing community services such as healthcare, mental health support, and more. The church has actually applied for a grant from the National Episcopal Church to hire a quarter-time community organizer who would help us be sure to incorporate the voices of Latino and Asian and Pacific Islander people in our neighborhood in our housing development process, to be sure that all stakeholders are represented. And so, Representative Pham, I will definitely be coming to you for help with finding that person if we get our grant. We've also, the church has been involved in the Levin Housing Project, and we're really excited about House Bill 2008A, which helps churches get tax relief from developing affordable housing and makes it possible for faith communities to continue to develop housing on the 600 buildable acres in the Portland metro area that faith communities currently steward. So I
I would love
appreciate
that too.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Sarah. I think what I love is, and if you go on their website, radical hospitality, and that's what it is. And it is this, I'm really coming to have this rubric in my mind about meeting people where they are physically, emotionally, mentally, intellectually, you know, and this is Rahab Sisters does that just really beautifully. So thank you so much, Sarah, for being here, and Connor's here too. Hi, Connor. Amazing work. I am going to, you guys, anyone who knows me knows my deep involvement in the gun violence prevention movement, especially Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense, but also through State of Safety. We had a really big week this week. It was an incredible week in the legislature between the 9 police accountability bills and passing Senate Bill 554B, which is actually 2 gun violence prevention bills together, which is pretty unheard of in our history. We're lucky if we get 1 bill passed every year, and we haven't passed a bill. I think we passed a tiny bill 2 years ago, didn't pass a bill last year, but this bill will require that guns are locked when they're not in use, which is something I've been working on. This is my 4th year working on that, along with my friend Paul Kemp, who really got me into this particular part of the work because of, you know, he lost his brother-in-law, Steve Forsyth, at the Clackamas Town Center shooting. And when Steve's family, Paul and Steve's widow, Carla, realized that the shooter just picked up a loaded AK-47 off a buddy's coffee table, and realized the scourge of stolen firearms and the importance of having firearms locked. Paul's an avid hunter and gun owner himself, and grew up in that heritage. But that was a pretty impactful day on Thursday to be on the House floor, texting with several of you here while it was unfolding. It was sometimes hard to listen to the opposition. I will just share that my Republican colleagues who testified against it, it's a strange feeling, because I've become friends with some of these people. And I will continue to be friends with these people, but it's hard to hear them twist, if not really lie about certain things. And I don't know how to navigate that going forward. And if Con has any thoughts, let me know. But the other part of the bill is that schools can opt to ban firearms on their premises, just like any private employer can do right now. Like my clinic, we ban firearms on our premises, and firearms will be prohibited from the Capitol building. I'm certainly grateful for that personally, because that's where I work now, but certainly a lot of Moms Demand Action volunteers have been there testifying on bills and have the opposition there openly carrying firearms. And it's obviously very intimidating. So huge week. It is expected to go back for a concurrence vote in the Senate. The latest I heard is it'll happen Wednesday, which is pretty phenomenal. I was worried it would be delayed. I will obviously be keeping you all posted on that. And then I'm already dreaming of some sort of outdoor signing ceremony with Governor Brown, so that a lot of people can participate in that safely, although we'll probably have to delay that a little bit. The other topic, of course, is COVID. Oregon is in the national news. Not for interesting restaurants or interesting green energy legislation, but our rate of COVID cases is rising fastest in the country. We were already in a meeting today, Rep. Pham and I, where Representative Dexter, who worked the ICU shift last night, said she lost 2 patients to COVID. So this is real, this is happening, and we absolutely need to employ the measures that Governor Brown put into effect yesterday in order to try to slow the spread of COVID. These measures have worked in the past. These measures, by all calculations, have saved 5,000 lives in Oregon from COVID. So with the caveat now that at least there's quite a bit of federal relief for restaurants, $28 billion that Congressman Blumenauer helped get for restaurants to apply for relief. And that needs to be even higher. We need to pay people to stay closed or pay people to close their indoor dining so that they can survive this fourth wave. The world as a whole is at its highest number of cases per day. We're at 800,000, half of which is coming out of India. So tough times for COVID with huge light at the end of the tunnel. I think a lot of us on this call are vaccinated, and that's incredibly exciting. Vaccines work, masks work. There's so much hope right now for getting to a point where things will be a lot more safe and a lot more open, but we need to hold tight for right now still. I think on that note, I would really like to open the floor, the metaphorical floor, to questions that people have. I'm trying to track the chat a little bit, but if someone wants to unmute.
And for questions to the open discussion to the floor, please raise your hand, and then we will unmute you in the order that people raise their hand.
You might want to, and you click on reactions under, at least my screen, the raised hand function is under the bottom raised hand, under reactions. Joe, I think you're on mute if you're trying to say something.
I think we have Cheryl up first. Thank you, Khanh Pham.
Thank you. I wanted to ask, with the revised House or Senate Bill 554, will cities like Portland still be able to prohibit guns in City Hall, for example, when we go to testify at City Hall?
Sadly, no. The bill only covers the state capitol and school buildings and grounds. And the school buildings are from K through like 16, I call it, including universities and community colleges. And this is one of those things that got negotiated out. Oh, was I muted that whole time?
Just for a brief second.
Were people, is that why everyone was going? I had such a good answer. No, but a sad answer. Sadly, no. City buildings, county buildings, state buildings, other than the state capitol, which were in the original 554, are no longer in the bill. And this is all part of the negotiating behind the scenes, very vigorous negotiating, which I was not part of. I'm not blaming the people who did it, but I can't give tons of insight as to how things get traded away. So that is something that we will continue to work on. I think what we need to do is just overall get rid of what's called preemption, which would allow any building, regardless of government, regardless of what level of government it's at, to make those decisions for their community. But as it is now, county, city, and state buildings, except for the state capitol, and I'm sorry, the Portland International Airport, cannot prohibit firearms. So that's frustrating.
Perfect. And then we think we have
Thanks for the question.
And we have Chris next. Chris Kobe.
Thank you. Rep. Pham, welcome to the legislature. I hope you're enjoying your service there. You must have really ticked somebody off because you also got appointed to the redistricting committee. And I was curious as to your reaction to being on the redistricting committee and what most surprises you about your service on that committee. Thank you.
Yeah, my first reaction was like, oh, like I know redistricting is important, but like it did not ask for it. But I love being on it just because I've learned so much about the importance of redistricting, the importance of, drawing these maps so that, like, I haven't really truly dug deep into the Voting Rights Act and the implications for communities of color as well as communities of interest. Like, what does it mean to actually make sure in a state like Oregon, which has such a history of white supremacy, frankly, and undermining the power of communities of color, like, what does it mean to actually make sure that certain communities actually have a voice and have a choice in who they vote for and how their communities are represented. So I think that's been probably my biggest learning, has been around some of the obligations that we have and the implications these maps, which we haven't even seen the census data yet. So right now we're still talking theoretically about it, but I'm excited to get the census data and continue to have the conversations with communities about what's unique about their community, what needs, how they want to be, have their interests kind of aggregated to make sure that they can have a voice.
Perfect. Next, we have Mark Fisher.
Hi, Lisa. I just wanted to say first, thank you for all of your great work on the gun bills. It's just fantastic. Well, I was confused when they got merged together because I thought, wow, that must make it harder. But apparently you guys have put the cake together the right way and it's going to not flop. I wondered about the Charleston loophole law, if you could update us on that. And also I did want to call attention to what I put in the chat. An appeal from the educational community to consider fully funding the Student Success Act that was passed. I guess there is a $500 million cut that is being proposed. And I would urge you both to support fully funding that act. I guess that's pretty much what I have. Other than to say thanks for all your hard work.
Thanks, Mark. I think the Charleston loophole will be a great short session bill in 2022. That's my plan for that. So thank you. And yes, on school funding, we'll be watching that carefully.
Perfect. Next, we have Steve and Bonnie.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. I wanted to thank Representative Reynolds. I'm a constituent in House District 36 for all your hard work, and congratulations on passing SB 554B. That's one of the bills that was. I also want to thank Representative Pham for her hard work on the climate justice and energy bills. All of those are covered among a total of about 55 bills that are supported by the Consolidated Oregon Indivisible Network, or COIN, which is a statewide coalition of grassroots groups. And you guys, all the legislators, will have received recently those all the bills that COIN is supporting. And so I urge you and thank you for your consideration on any of the bills that are included among those. And any comments on the energy stuff would be welcome. Thank you.
I will, of course, turn that over to Con, but I will just a shout out for the COIN process, because I was part of that process 2 years ago. A group of volunteers, incredibly hardworking, intelligent volunteers, although I was one of them, so maybe not all, put together a list that gets vetted by a pretty large group of people. So I feel like it's an incredibly nicely vetted list of legislative priorities by the COIN network. And then Rep. Pham, you want to talk a little bit about some of the energy. Steve, what was your exact question? I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, just any comments regarding the prospects of the energy and climate justice bills, especially the big three that are kind of a package?
Well, I feel pretty confident about energy affordability and healthy homes. And 100% clean, I'm also cautiously optimistic as well. And I just want to say, I mean, it's, amidst the pandemic and all this other stuff, it's hard to, I don't feel like we have given as much attention recently in the news on the climate crisis, but I know that we have some of the hottest and driest April. I think some of the temperatures that we're experiencing now foreshadow a really devastating fire season this year, and we're going to keep experiencing the impacts of climate change unless we take really drastic action. I no longer say it's for my daughter or anything like that. I think this is something that's going to affect us right now, who is living right now, and we need to we need to, I feel like sometimes there's our imagination is still somewhat hampered by what's considered politically possible right now. And we're like, oh, we could just make these tweaks and send some price signals here and there, but we really need to take really strong action. And yes, we need to send price signals, and we need to just make major investments in renewable energy and use the power of the collective power that the government has to really shape our economy. So, I mean, those are just broad questions, broad comments, but I just feel this real urgency because it's no longer just future generations or people far away. I hope the Oregonians are feeling it front and center, and it's always the most vulnerable who are impacted the hardest in terms of who can escape from smoky air, who can actually even leave their home and have a place to stay when they have to run away from wildfires. Like, this is so urgent, and I hope that our legislators take it with the same amount of seriousness that our most vulnerable communities are having to take this issue.
Perfect. Now we have Kathy.
Hi, first of all, I want to say for both of you, I'm really impressed how quickly you both have gotten into almost leadership positions on some of your committees. I've been monitoring particularly the Energy and Environment committees for the League of Women Voters, and have been impressed with the kinds of questions that Representative Pham has been asking. I do want to thank both of you for supporting the offshore wind bill, which just passed the House unanimously this last week, and of course the affordable energy passed the House a while ago. Several other interesting bills that Representative Pham got to vote on included an interesting one on that feeding certain types of seaweed to cattle will actually decrease the methane in their burps by a very significant amount. The one that's found to do the best doesn't grow in Oregon, but I just saw a program on BBC this morning that there's some cold water kelp that they're also investigating. And surprisingly, cattle burp out a lot of methane. It's one of our major sources. And when we try to get down to net zero, it's going to be important. And then you're going to be getting in fact, you've already gotten the the renewable hydrogen bill, had its public hearing. So I assume Representative Pham got to see that. And that also passed the House unanimously. So unlike this is a public comment, not representing the League of Women Voters. Unlike the Republicans in Congress, our Republicans in the legislature seem to kind of pick and choose which climate-related bills they support and which they don't.
Thank you for that, Kathy. And I just want to say that highlights what I remember hearing before I got to the legislature, and I'm now seeing in action, is that the vast majority of bills that are voted off the House floor enjoy bipartisan support. And there are quite a few that pass unanimously. And obviously they don't make the press as much. I mean, conflict seems to, the gun bill obviously got a lot of press, although, the police accountability bills got a lot of press too. And I think something like 6 out of 9 were unanimous, and others enjoyed, really broad bipartisan support. So it is heartening. And in years past, the Republicans walked out on gun bills, and they didn't yesterday, and they addressed the need to stay there and do the work. And part of me feels a little funny, like, oh my gosh, thank you for not walking out. But it is a little bit, thank you for not walking out. They are getting pressure from their communities to walk out on, especially on the gun violence prevention bills. So I do want to give credit where credit's due that, and like I said, these people are now becoming our friends, and we're gonna work hard to continue to do the work, that we need to do for Oregon's people. And I don't know, kind of, if you have any.
Well, I just wanted to acknowledge that, we're becoming an increasingly polarized state where the pressure, when we say they're getting pressure, in some cases they're getting explicit threats to their safety if they actually even show up. Like, I think I heard that they are actually getting threats of being shot at the grocery store if they actually show up for the gun bill. So I'm hopeful that we can, I don't think we need to be friends, but I think we need to actually have trust. I mean, we, at least, I don't know what, I'm still figuring out my relationships too, but I do, yeah, I just want to recognize that we need to acknowledge some of the differences, the different political landscapes we're facing in our districts. And we need, I'm really committed to traveling across, what if it takes more listening tours and real, like, to going on joint bipartisan listening tours to understand each other better, so that we are truly united as a state. Because I have so much love for Oregon, and it really breaks my heart that we're for many years now, seeing each other as enemies is going to be really damaging to our ability to pass the kind of policies that our communities need right now.
Yeah, great point. Judy has a question, and then I was going to ask Joe to kind of read some of the questions out of the chat. So go ahead, Judy.
Hi. Well, that last statement about reaching across the aisle kind of defanged my question, which was, you two are part of just a really strong freshman class, and you're part of supermajority in the House, and we have one in the Senate. So I think a lot of voters of the Democratic persuasion just sort of assume Democrats could pass whatever they wanted in this long session because you had supermajorities. So that's kind of pie in the sky, and really politics is the art of the possible. But do you feel like the Democrats are too deferential to Republican feelings?
I used to be one of those people saying that too, like, what is going on in that building? Like, what's the point of a supermajority if you don't use it?
Mm-hmm.
And now I think it's about quorum reform. If we had quorum reform, I think that would make a big difference. We have one of the highest bars for quorum, and other states just have a simple majority, and you can take action. But with as long as we have the quorum rules that we have, we can't actually fully act because they do have essential veto power, and they're using it in other ways. The reading of every single word of every single bill is essentially a walkout, because it slows us down so much that it's essentially a veto power, because these bills, even changing this, like, we wanted to add, I think, the word cannabis to the OLCC commission's title, but that was like 150 pages. I mean, every single bill is just, to do law, you need to be precise. And we have great things called computers now, where I can actually read a bill and be much more critical about a bill through reading it, writing it up. I don't get much by hearing it spoken. So I think there's some realities around quorum that still prevent us from exercising the power that a supermajority has, but can't fully exercise at this moment.
Thank you.
We are working on a quorum requirement, but I think it's going to have to go to that would be a walkout bill. And I think I've heard that there's groups working on it to make it a ballot referendum.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think there's two groups gathering signatures for a quorum, requirement change to simple majority. Yeah, I think there's only like 3 or 4 states in the country that have a requirement like we do. Yeah, so I will say, Judy, on the gun bill, which actually I think the bill is great. I wish it had city, county, state buildings in it, but the safe storage part of it was really, really well preserved from our original intent at the beginning of the session. But it is constantly, what can we move forward without them walking out?
Yeah.
And so doing all that front end negotiation so that hopefully it doesn't happen. And, we were grateful to see it didn't happen in the House, and then we hope it doesn't happen in the Senate. We don't think it will because of all the front end negotiations that happened.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
And then we do have one question from the chat. Rob Fulmer is asking about Senate Bill 712, which is expanding HEC voting rights to campus community representatives. I just wanted to get your thoughts on that and see where both the representatives are at on that.
I only know a teeny bit about that bill, and I will say it makes sense to me. HEC is the Higher Education something.
Coordinating Commission. I'm just looking it up right
And so it's a commission that kind of oversees our university system. And if you want to comment on this at all or ask more specifically, I would say it makes sense to me. I don't know the bill well enough to even know where it's going, or if it sounds like it's in committee right now, in the House committee, but it certainly sounds like it makes sense. And Khan, do you have any?
Yeah, so Rob, just for folks who can't read the chat, campus. So right now it sounds like there's 5 non-voting positions for campus representatives on the HEC. And this would actually give them voting power. And also looking at the O list, it says it would add 1 additional position for a graduate student, 1 graduate student attending public university. I think that makes a lot of sense too. I haven't researched it deeply, but I know that the people I respect and support who have been following it are also sponsors and chief sponsors. And as a graduate student myself, when I was at PSU, I was appalled because I had worked for a decade before I went to graduate school, and I was appalled by the lack of power that graduate students face, which is also mirrored by, the kind of current higher education system. So I would be supportive. Rob, can you not go on? Oh, when he's saying when I was on it, I led a subcommittee, but I couldn't vote on the full committee.
Great, thanks for bringing that to our attention. We'll definitely kind of tag that for us. But if if it makes it through the Senate, which tends to be a little more conservative than the House. I mean, I don't want to make a blanket statement, but it sounds like it's probably has a good chance of passing all the way through.
Mm-hmm. And then we have another question that was sent to me right now, saying, would either rep support providing at least a public hearing for HJR 7, which would put a constitutional amendment for an independent redistricting commission on the ballot?
I have no idea who asked that question. Chris Kobe. No, I can't make any commitments. Chris,
I can answer. I could just say
no. Khan can talk. Sorry.
Ultimately, I do think that we need to talk about an independent commission. I think other states some other states have done it, California and Washington, but I think they did it over years to develop a process that was truly, because it's such a, I think we like to think that, we can come up with something that's bipartisan, and independent means you're totally free of political, partisan considerations. But the truth is, any kind of system of 10 unelected, representatives are not necessarily independent. And so I want to make sure that we're doing this thoughtfully, that we're actually making sure that communities of color have their voices represented, that young voters, immigrants are represented in this independent commission. And so I just want to make sure that we're doing a thoughtful process. So I absolutely would support in the future a really thoughtful process. I'm not sure about HJR 7 because I haven't, and that's what Minority Leader Christine Drazen has introduced, and I don't support doing it in this session. I think we have 90 elected and accountable legislators who represent literally every single geographic area in the state. So I think we need to trust these elected and accountable representatives for this process, and then look to the next redistricting to make sure that we lay out a process that can be truly representative and equitable.
And I just private messaged Chris, to be clear, I'm teasing him. Of course, this is a very important conversation to be having on redistricting, which impacts so much going forward. And I'll be really candid. It's one thing to have thoughts about redistricting before you're before you're in the party in power, and just meaning that absolutely need to be very thoughtful on how an independent commission would work. But I think it's a wonderful idea, and I think it would bring even more legitimacy to the process. Right now, as many
the process is very legitimate too.
Huh?
As long as the process of forming the independent commission could also be defensible.
Yes. No, I think that's a great point. Right. From it's baked in. Yeah. No, but great. Thanks, Chris, for that.
And I think we have time for one final question if anyone has anything.
One thing I thought I would bring up because Rep Pham and I talked on the phone, I think Thursday. We are at this tipping point where the number of people who want vaccines used to be much higher than the number of vaccines, whatever the supply demand curve. We're getting to this tipping point where we may have more vaccines than people who desire vaccines, and that's because of vaccine hesitancy. And vaccine hesitancy can have a serious negative effect on our ability to really start reopening and to start feeling safe in our communities because of the need to reach this herd immunity. So everyone across the country is grappling with this, including at the federal level. And there's been some interesting ideas around incentivizing people to get vaccines. And also the other thing that I mentioned earlier is meeting people where they are. I know Connor and Rahab Sisters are looking at doing outreach vaccine clinics where we go into some of the homeless camps. That's where the Johnson & Johnson vaccine would come in really handy because one shot and you're done. But I would just say that we need to start, we should have started months ago, but at least today, Rep Pham and I are talking about the need to really think creatively and boldly about what we can do to get people vaccinated. A lot of it is education. A lot of it is encouraging people to talk to their medical providers for those who have them. A lot of it is meeting people where they are physically, emotionally, days off work. One other idea is paying people for the time they would need to take off work in order to come and get a vaccine. Those are programs that exist in other states. And I just have to believe this is money well spent. My son, who's an economics major, we were talking about where does that cross over where, the huge buckets of money you would spend to vaccinate people pays itself back in spades because we can reopen restaurants and the economy sooner. So more to come on that. And if you have any more you want to comment on that, Con, please do. And then we'll let Mark close us out.
I would just add that yes, there are some people who are hesitant to take vaccines, and then there are still communities who face real challenges and barriers to getting the vaccine because they're working 2 part-time jobs, because they don't have a car, because they don't have childcare. And so that's another way that the economic incentives can actually help people overcome some of the barriers, as well as, of course, mobile vaccine clinics. And, we need all of the strategies, and I'm excited to work with Rep Reynolds about really pushing our governor, our Oregon Health Authority to try to invest in some more innovative strategies, including straight up cash.
Yeah. And I was in my clinic yesterday seeing patients, and one of my partners told me she has a family where the mom is really reticent to get a vaccine. And my partner said, we're really hoping to start doing vaccines here at the children's clinic. And the mom's eyes just lit up. She's like, oh my gosh, I would totally come here to get a vaccine because again, we are kind of already a trusted resource. So I did call the governor's office and OHA yesterday saying, please give us vaccines. Mark, why don't you close us out with a softball question? No, I'm teasing. Close us out with whatever you want to say.
Well, hopefully it's a smile. I wanted to say thank you again to both of you. And I did hear of one program in another state where they were offering a free beer for a shot. And I would encourage maybe we consider this in Oregon for those that are over 21.
Good idea. Yeah. There's the Krispy Kreme too, but great. Well, thank you all so much for spending some of your time with us this morning. Thank you, Sarah and Connor from Rahab Sisters. Thank you, of course, to Representative Khanh Pham for joining us. It's such a pleasure to have you. I know my constituents really enjoyed meeting you today and hearing about your.
I enjoyed meeting all of you as well. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you. Have a great rest of your weekend.
Have a great Saturday. Bye, everyone.